Hi class, we're looking at modules this week, modular programming, and in Java we implement modules by creating methods. This hierarchy chart that's showing here on the screen shows a standard program modular flow where we have a main module that calls an input module, calls a process module, and then calls an output module. This is kind of a standard thing that you've probably seen since the beginning of your intro to programming days. With REPL, of course, they call it the read, execute, program logic loop or something. What do they call it? Read, eval, print loop. That's REPL's loop. Either way, we're looking at modules, right? Modular programming. We want to split things up so that multiple programmers can effectively be working together. And by creating modular programs, that's a first step towards doing that. So we want to learn how to create methods in Java. So I have NetBeans here. I'm going to create a new project. And I want to name this method practice. And, oops, I'll make it method practice 2. How's that? I already have one. Now, of course, using NetBeans, if I were to want to copy my code into REPL, I would name my main class to be named main with an uppercase M. So I'll change my create main class item to main without the 2. And then I can copy and paste this into REPL. We'll let NetBeans create that project. Now I have a project already kind of saved off. That's one that we did in the REPL work in our last chapter. Let's take a look at it. This program is a loop where we prompt the user for an input integer. When they give us an integer, we print that integer out and then prompt for another integer. So again, just like REPL is saying, read, execute, print, loop, right? We're not doing a lot of executing here, but when we added our number to a sum, then we were adding in that execute ability. So let's start splitting this up. First of all, let's run it. I didn't do that thing where I named it main, huh? So now I should be able to run it. My main class did not match my file name. So when we're working with Java, the class name that is within our class file must name the name of our file, our .java file. So some of these things are a little bit hard to bring up when you're beginning to program, but you guys are getting to the point now where it's probably starting to cause you trouble. So start being aware of those environmental issues. Whoops. So I'm going to type my integer and another one and 99, and then I get my program completion message. So that's how this program works. So I'd like to create a method to take care of prompting for input. Think that maybe the first method I create, though, will make it even simpler and will output a welcome message. So a method has a header part, like in the method that we've been putting all of our code in. The header is public static void main, and then we have some parameters within parentheses. Then our method body is enclosed within an opening and closing curly brace. We've seen that, right? So when we add a new method, we need to put this new method's header information after the closing curly brace for any previous methods. I'm going to update my font size here a little bit. That should go way up there. Let's see how it looks. That's better. So I want to be in my code at the end of my main method. Now I still have one closing curly brace left, because that's the one that ends my main class. Now I want to create a new method, and I know first of all I need my method access level. And our access level, is public or private. That means it's helping me out here. And for now, we're going to make our methods public. Public meaning that they could be used by any class. Static is a keyword that indicates a special kind of method that's compiled down to an executable and is only loaded into memory once. For now, because we'll be calling our methods from our main method, which is a static method, we have to make our methods static also. Now the next keyword is the return type of the method. Our main method, if you notice, has a return type of void. Our method, our welcome method, is also going to have a return type of void. That means that no data is returned to the calling method by this method. I'm going to name my method welcome, and I'm going to put open and closing parentheses. I have no parameters. Then my open and closing curly braces to denote my method body. So let's update our comment up here. We have access level, then for now, static, our return type, which we have said is void, and then our method name. After our method name, we have parameters within parentheses. So we're ready to put some code in here. Now we know to output, we can do the system.out.println. And to remember, with NetBeans, you can type SOUT and press tab, and that'll insert that code into the IDE window for you. I want to output something really helpful like, welcome to the integer iterator. Any integers are welcome. All right, that looks good for our welcome method. Now, whenever we create a method, it's all happy and good. It's sitting here being a method in our code, but it doesn't do anything unless we call it. So we need to put in a call to our welcome method. Let's run this program without a call first so you can see it works the same as it used to. No difference. So this extra code isn't causing any trouble, but it's also not doing anything because it's not being called. So I'm going to put my call for this right after I declare the sentinel value. Now to call a method in the simplest way, we can just put the method's name followed by opening and closing parentheses and a semicolon, and that's going to call the method. So when we call the method at this line in our code, execution is going to jump to our method. Execution will continue with all the lines of code in our method. When executor hits the closing curly brace, control return back to the line of code where our method was called, continuing on from that point. So let's run our program now. We see our new welcome message, and now we're prompting for an integer, and that should all work just the same as it used to. So our method got called, and it did something. Yay! So now let's create another method to do our prompting for input. We're doing that a lot. We have these lines of code, enter a valid integer, enter the sentinel to quit, and then using our scanner to read the information in. So let's create a method to take care of that. my method is going to continue being public and static, but I want to return a value from this method. I want to return whatever value the user inputs. My return value then is going to be an integer. So I'll put int as my return type. Now my method name, let's call it getInput. Now the lines of code that I want in my getInput method are already created here in our code. So I'm going to cut these 3 lines of code and this comment that says prompt for a number. We cut those, and I'm going to paste those lines of code into our new method. Okay, now our method is doing this prompt for us, but we have a few problems in our method. First of all, we don't know what Sentinel is within our method, and we don't know what the word input means within our method. Those were things that were declared in our main method. So our main method knows about these variables, but our getInput method doesn't. That's called variable scope. These variables can only be seen in the method that they're declared in. Since they're declared in our main method, their scope is that method and that method only. So there's lots of ways that we could handle this situation. The first way we're going to use to handle this is to set up parameters to pass these items to our getInput method. So the first thing our getInput method needs is that scanner. We called it input in our main method. We could call it input here in our getInput method, but we could also call it something else. So let's call it something else just so we don't think we have to name it the same thing. So I need a scanner to accept my input, and I need that Sentinel value. It was an integer. Now I'm going to change, first of all, the value of my Sentinel variable within my method to be this new lowercase variable that is specific to this method. Our scanner, instead of being named input, will be named INP because that's what we're passing. Now lastly, instead of declaring a number named integer or integer named number to hold the user input, we need to return that input back to our main so that it can use that data. So I'm going to change this to use the keyword return. Now all of my errors should be cleared up in my method so I can return to my main and start implementing my method or putting in the call to it. Now my call is going to go right after my welcome message. I think up here at the top I'm going to declare my integer named number. And then after our welcome message, I'm going to set number equal to whatever gets returned by our getInput method. Now our getInput method required some parameters. The first parameter is the name of a scanner. Well, we have a scanner declared, and it's called input. So we'll use that to pass to our getInput method. And to pass it as an argument to our parameters, I'll just put its name in the call and say use that input variable and pass it on down to that method. Now I also need to pass the Sentinel, so I'll use that as my second parameter. So notice that since I have 2 parameters in my method header, I need 2 parameters when I call the method. The first parameter is supposed to be a scanner, so I use my scanner object. The second parameter is supposed to be an integer, and we used our Sentinel object. The parameters need to be in the same order in the method header as they are in the call to the method. Now I notice that I have some duplicate code here within my while loop. I don't need to have this code anymore. I'll delete all 3 lines of code there from my while loop. Those are the 3 lines of code that I had moved down to my get input method. So now to continue my while loop, we'll update the value of number by setting it equal to the value returned from our new get input method. Again, we're going to pass in our scanner and our sentinel value to that new method. Now, if we've done everything correctly, we should see no difference in the execution of our program. So let's run it. All right, so here's our welcome message coming out of our welcome method. And here we're seeing our prompt to enter a valid integer coming from our get input method. And everything seems to be working wonderfully, just the same as it was before. Now, in our program, we don't really have a lot of output. We just print out the number. So let's create an output method, and we'll do just a little bit more. Now, in this case, I let NetBeans take care of that closing comment for me, and it looks much nicer. Comments are super important in our code. Now, I'm going to create a static method. My output method does not need to return any values, so I'll make that return type void. I do want to make it something like print output. And I'm going to need to know what that number is that we got from the user so that I can print it out. So again, I'll do the S-out tab and say that I want to print out something nice like your number is their number. Now, here in my main method, where we were outputting our number, let's replace that by calling our new print output method. This method does not return a value, so I don't need to prefix it with a variable, but it does require a parameter, and that parameter is the number that we're using, that we got from our user. So now we're doing our print output method. Let's run our program. And everything is working great. So if let's see, I can't zoom out or in very well, but if we scroll up a little bit, we can see then that our program has become modularized. And now from our main method, we call a new method called welcome. We call our get input method and pass the input scanner and our sentinel. And then in our while loop, we call our print output and our get input, and we will continue to do that until the user inputs -99, when we will stop our loop and be done with our program. So let's see if we can set up the debugger to step through that code. We could use the website to visualize it, but let's try our debugger. The debugger is very valuable. Now let's you step through your code and see what variable values are. So I'm going to choose attach debugger. I want the Java debugger That should be fine. Obviously not what I want, so let's just debug our project. Maybe I'm making it too hard. So my project is now running in debug mode. Let me scoot up here so you can see what's going on. I'm debugging this project, and we can see we have some different icons on NetBeans up here, and these are the debugger icons. If I look at my output, I see that I'm prompting for the user's input. Now, as I look at my debugger information, see, I'm going to click Debug Project again. We have some variables. I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint here. I right-clicked on the line of code where we declare our number is an integer. Oops. It's like you're still doing something. You can't do that. Can I do that here? There we go. Let me do it on the call to our method. I can't set a breakpoint on the declaration of a variable because there isn't really any code going on there to break. Now that I've set a breakpoint, let's try debug project again. Oh, that looks better, doesn't it? Now we're seeing some things. First of all, it's showing me that I have this scanner object named input. I can see all sorts of system things if I'm interested in doing so. Oh, there's my Sentinel variable. Look at him. He is set with a value of -99. Let's go ahead and run some of our program. Right now, our breakpoint is set at the call to our welcome method. So the debugger is sitting here waiting to execute my code. I don't have any output yet, showing me those variables. Nice. So now I do have my special debugger icons that I was looking for earlier. And so what I'm going to choose is step into. And what step into is going to do is step into my code and start executing the line of code that runs my welcome method. And sure enough, now I'm in my welcome method. The debugger is sitting at my first line of code that outputs the welcome method. If I click step into again, which notice I could press F7 to do the same thing, that line of code will be executed. Now it's going to do some system things that I'm going to want to step over. So I'm going to step over here. And try to get back to my code. There we go. So all that Java stuff is wonderful, but I don't really want to see it all, huh? Now, in our output, we should see that our first line of output was output. Yay! I'm going to step into again to this next print statement. And again, I'm going to step over, step over, step over, step over. And that takes me back to my code. Now I see that both of those lines of code have run. Quite painful, huh? Keep stepping into. Now I'm at the next line of my code in my main method. So notice how my welcome method was executed. Execution control was returned to my main method where it continued on, and now we're ready to run our get input method. I'm going to step into, and here we are. We're in our get input method. We're looking for a valid scanner. Let's see what we've got as variables. We can see that in this method we have a scanner named INP. Sure enough, that's what we named our scanner that was being passed to us. And we have an integer named sentinel, our lowercase sentinel, that's set to a value of -99. Sure enough, so let's print that out. And now our next prompt asks them for the sentinel or their number. So I'm going to step into and over and over. Now, we're at the line of code where we're ready to return the value that our user typed in. If we dug down deep into our scanner object, we might be able to find that value. But we'd have to dig pretty deep. So instead, we'll just continue on and see that we return our integer. I'm going to step over to get back to our code. Got to type something in there, huh? So I made everything to sit and wait for me till I typed, didn't I? So now we are at the point where we're actually ready to return that value. So our call to our scanner was executed, and we did that next integer method that got that integer that I finally typed in. And now we're ready to return that to our caller, which is our main method. So now if we look at our variables, we should see our number variable. I'm going to continue to step into. There's our number variable set to that 45 that I typed in. Now it took all of that just to get that first number typed in. We're going into our while loop. Our while loop executes while our number, which is a value of 45 right now, is not equal to our sentinel, which is a value of -99. So we can continue to step into, which is going to first print out our number. I'm going to step over that and then see that output. And then it's going to run our get input method again to prompt us for input. And of course it's going to sit there and wait until I finally type something. If I get there. And I just skipped on past all that. As you work with the debugger, you'll get more and more used to what's going on with it. But that is one reason that I do like that visualizer site. Let's try that. I'm going to copy all this code. And of course I know it's Python tutor, but I like just looking for it that way. Okay, so I'm going to paste my code on the Python tutor site and try to run this. Visualize execution. Sometimes it just takes it a second. All right, so I'm ready to visualize my execution. First line is going to execute is setting up my scanner. We saw that in NetBeans in the debugger, but it wasn't quite so graphical or so easy. So here we see that we have a scanner instance created named input. We now have a Sentinel variable declared that's value is -99. Now we're going to call our welcome method. So when I click forward, we should see execution branch to our welcome method. We're ready to output our first welcome message and our next one, and then we'll be done with that method. We return nothing, so we just go back. Now in our main method, we use our number variable as a place to store the return value from our getInput method. Our getInput method has two parameters, the scanner named input and our Sentinel variable named Sentinel. So we made that call. We're ready to output the first line of our prompt and the second line of our prompt. And now we're waiting to return the value. I knew there was a way to do it somewhere. No such element exception. Oh, I just made it really mad. Back. Okay, let's see if I can go one more back. Okay, so now we're asking for our integer. Enter -99 to quit. It won't let me type anything. If I go forward, gets mad at me. Well, sometimes it can just be hard to see what your code is doing. So that's why you resort back to the wonderful debugger. So no matter what you have to do it to understand what's going on. Work with the debugger, work with the visualizer, either way, but they'll help you to see what's going on, even if sometimes they're a little bit frustrated or fraught with the errors. Remember, that's why the programmers get the big bucks, right? If it were easy, everyone would do it. Okay, so I'm going to end this thing. We looked at creating a lot of different types of methods. We created a method that was void, that didn't return any data. We created a method that prompted for input and returned an integer and had some parameters. And we created a method that output some data to the console, but did not return any value to its caller, and it did accept a parameter. So these should be pretty good examples for you. Find some exercises online or try some ideas of your own, but no matter what you're doing, keep practicing. Thanks.